communities. And as in that role, it's my great privilege to extend a very warm welcome to you all to this event, which is being held as part of the sector's celebration of 20 years of enhancement-led approach to quality in Scotland. As you may know, the campaign will culminate in the Shaping the Student Experience Together 20 Years of Enhancement conference on the 14th and 15th of June at Glasgow Caledonian University. The spaces for the in-person conference are filling up fast, so please do make sure you register now, and a link to the registration page will be posted in the chat box for you. As part of the 20 years of enhancement, QAA Scotland has run a monthly programme of activity. And if you haven't been able to attend any of those events, a link to the full programme of events and the associated resources will be posted also in the chat for you to explore later. But today it's my real pleasure to welcome you to the third and final discussion panel event. And the title of this discussion is Building Connection, the Role of Enhancement in Embracing Relationship-Rich Education. I myself have been really inspired by the work of our guest speakers, and I'm really looking forward to the discussion today. We're hoping for a very open debate. So following the initial presentation, please do contribute questions in the chat or raise your hand if you wish to speak, and I'll do my best to give you an opportunity to speak and ask a question of our speakers. But now I'm going to hand over to Professor Peter Felten, who's going to introduce the speakers and start the discussion. So thank you, Peter.
Thank you, Professor Petty. It's an honor to be here with you all, celebrating 20 years of enhancement themes. Special thanks to Amy from QAA and Claire for all the work to organize this, and Scott behind the scenes. And I want to begin with a brief apology for my American accent. Occasionally, some of us will use terms that might not be familiar to you or might be American higher education terms. And so please forgive us when we do that. Like I said, it's a pleasure to be here. This session is really meant to be conversational. How we're going to run the conversation is we, the four of us, Robyn, Amaya, Leo, and I, are going to go first. And Leo and I will begin with brief introductions and framings. Then Robyn and Amaya will kick off the real heart of the session with stories from their experiences as students. Robyn at Abertay University in Scotland, and Amaya at Elon University in North Carolina in the United States. While we're doing that fishbowl conversation, we really encourage you to use the chat to have a vibrant back channel exchange, to post questions, insights, comments, things like that. About halfway, maybe a little more than halfway through our time together, we're going to open up the discussion from the four of us with Claire to everybody. And that'll be a time for just open conversation driven by your questions, your insights, your concerns. The heart of this session, as Claire said, is about relationship-rich education and how powerful relationships are in shaping the student experience. And when we think about relationship-rich education, I want to emphasize there's really two key actors in this work. One is us. It's the institutions, it's the staff at those institutions who have a primary responsibility for creating relationship-rich experiences. I'm going to do a tiny bit of framing around that. Leo then is going to talk about the other key actor in this, which is students. And that's why we're going to be centering students in our conversation today. As you may know, you've probably seen in the handout, Leo and I were lucky enough to publish a book in 2020 called Relationship-Rich Education: How Human Connections Drive Success in College. And that book synthesized decades and decades of research, mostly in the US, but also around the world, including a bunch from the UK. And then almost 400 interviews Leo and I conducted in 2019 at a little more than 24 higher education institutions in the US. And our aim in that book, our purpose in that book, was really to invite readers, to challenge readers to thinking about centering human relationships in the undergraduate student experience. We wanted to make that invitation, that challenge, because the research is so clear that the quality of relationships students form with academic staff and with their peers are really foundational to their learning, to their well-being, to their sense of belonging, to their persistence. And there's interesting research from the United States that alumni, university graduates who report having strong relationships with academic staff, actually decades after they graduate, are more likely to say they're thriving personally and professionally than alumni who don't report having had that experience as an undergraduate. So these relationships leave a real strong legacy. Now, in the handout, we mentioned the 4 principles from that book. And just really briefly, I don't want to read them to you, but the key thing, 4 key things, are that what students need and what relationships provide is what someone in our book we interviewed called relentless welcome. They need to feel welcomed every day and in every interaction. And that's as true in the classroom as out of the classroom. In fact, the second principle about relationships being a powerful means to inspire students to learn, sometimes in the US, faculty, academic staff will say, well, this is the work of other people. And my classroom is about chemistry, or my classroom is about history, or something like this. And what our research shows, what the research shows very clearly, is the classroom is absolutely central to student learning and to student relationship building. In fact, it's quite clear in the US, if students don't have relational experiences in the classroom, they're unlikely to have them anywhere in higher education. Third point is that what students need is not a simple and single mentor. What they need is what Brad Johnson, a scholar in the US, calls a constellation of mentors and relationships that are really powerful to them. And that's important to recognize for students. It's also in some ways liberating for us as academic staff, because I don't have to be everything to each of my students. I need to be one star in their constellation, and I can help those students connect with lots of other resources. It doesn't have to all be on me. And then finally, one of the challenges in the US right now in higher education, perhaps this is an issue where you are, is how transactional education can be. Students often come to university being told, you know, your goal is to get through and get out, get a degree, get a good paying job. That's what it's all about. Or as one of my friends likes to say, they pay and we give them A's, right? That's what we do. And we want college, we want university to be much more than that. And the research shows that the quality of relationships students have with their peers and with academic staff are really essential in turning university education from something that is transactional to something that really is transformational, getting them to think about big questions of who they are, who they're becoming, how they contribute to the world. So that is why it's so important for us, institutional actors, academic staff, to try to create relationship-rich education. Leo's now going to talk a bit about the role of students in this work.
Thank you, Peter. Good morning, everyone. I'm Leo Lambert. I'm the president emeritus of Elon University. I was president of this institution for about 20 years, and now I'm a professor here. As Peter said, we are all important shapers of institutional culture, and especially cultures that value students and value the efforts that faculty and staff put into relationship building with our students, and cultures, I think most importantly, that value high quality teaching. But soon after we finished writing relationship-rich education, I think it was evident to Peter and I that it was important to think about creating a second volume, a companion volume for our students, because as Peter noted, students are critical actors in relationship building, and they have agency that they need to exercise in order to create relationship-rich experiences for themselves when they are in college. So the two of us teamed up with our good friend Isis Artzi Vega, who is the provost of Valencia College, a wonderful 5-campus, 2-year institution in Florida outside of Orlando, and Oscar Miranda Tapia, who was an Elon alum, a DACA student, a student who came to the United States as a child without documentation, came to Elon University, excelled here, went to Harvard, and then came back to Elon to head up programs for first generation college students and is now in a doctoral program at North Carolina State University. So we wrote a book. It's coming out in a couple of weeks. The electronic version of it will be available in a couple of weeks. The book is called Connections Are Everything, a college student's guide to relationship-rich education. And we were very fortunate to get a grant from the Gardner Institute in North Carolina that went to Johns Hopkins Press. So the book is going to be free to students, to anyone all over the world over Project Muse, which we're really excited about. So I think there are really just 4 quick messages that I want to emphasize with regard to connections are everything, and themes to think about with regard to the role of students in relationship-rich education. The first is, I think we have to help our students believe that faculty and staff and peers want to help them succeed. And in order for that to happen, they have to experience the kind of relentless welcome that people spoke about. I think one of the experiences that Peter and I had in conducting those nearly 400 interviews was that too many students are just one conversation away from leaving college. And there is a lot of imposter syndrome out there on our campuses. There's a lot of anxiety. There's a lot of fears. And so I think we have work to do to help students really believe that people are here for them. Secondly, we have to guide our students to understand that one of the most important outcomes of college is to create this constellation of mentors. I think American college students in particular sometimes bring a transactional mindset with them to university and think about, well, my relationship with my professor is principally about bargaining for a grade or getting here and quickly declaring a major without really thinking about, why am I here at university? What is my purpose? And what are my passions? What do I have to give to the world? And those big questions, of course, need to be explored in relationship with other people. Thirdly, the book is about helping students learn strategies to build relationships in college. And we do this, I think, through storytelling. We've interviewed quite a few additional students for our new book. We did this after COVID. And our students told us amazing stories of challenge and persistence and people that helped them recover from mistakes, people that inspired them. We have a rising generation of what we call new American college students in the U.S. Students who are first generation, students who are people of color, students whose family have not had university, history of 7 generations of college attendance in their family. And so these students, I think, they don't come to university with kind of natural, easy understanding about how to form a relationship with a professor. And so this book is designed to guide students with advice from other students about practical strategies to begin to seed this relationship building. And then lastly, Connections Are Everything is, I think, emphasizes to students that it just takes one person to get started in creating a relationship-rich education. Yes, we want them to form a constellation, and with intentionality, they will. But when they're new and they're just beginning, what we're urging them to do is to focus on that one person that can help them get started. And there are lots of stories in this book about how students branch out from that relationship and begin to form their constellation. So what I want to do now is turn really to the stars of this show, who are Robyn and Amaya, and we'll have a little fishbowl conversation here. I'm going to ask Robyn and Amaya 3 questions to kind of get the pump primed, and then once they set the table with some more ideas, we're going to open it up for, as Peter noted, for conversation for the entire group. So we'll start with you, Robyn. Robyn, what I'd like both you and Amaya to do is tell us a story. Tell us a story about a relationship that made a real difference for you.
Hi everyone. So my story, it took place during lockdown, the first lockdown. So this was about December 2020, something like that. So maybe a lot of other students can relate to this. My teaching had been all on campus, so I was used to, going in every day, seeing my friends in class, and then going and having lunch in the cafe afterwards, to suddenly being completely alone in my wee flat in Dundee, just on the computer. So it was from one extreme to the other, and I quite struggled with that, to be honest. And I thought, this is difficult. I'm struggling to focus on my lectures. I'm not seeing my friends. This is actually a bit tough. And I thought, well, maybe I'm not the only student going through this. Maybe some of my friends feel the same. So my class, we had this group chat where we just talk about, I don't know, when is this essay due, things like that. I just put a message in the chat and I said, actually, I'm struggling a bit, guys. Does anyone feel the same? And then suddenly all these messages flooded in saying, I feel the same, I'm struggling too. Wow, I thought it was just me. And that was really eye-opening to me, I think, because I thought, well, it's not just me. All these other students feel the same. And then together we were able to support each other and encourage each other, like, guys, we've got this, we can do this, we can get our exams done, we can submit our essays, we can progress to the next year. So I thought that was a nice story, because from something sort of negative, everyone being at home and being worried about COVID and everything, we were able to create a nice support network for each other and spur each other on and finish the year.
Thank you, Robyn. Amaya, tell us a story about a relationship that made a difference in your life at Elon.
Thank you. And hi, everyone. I'm happy to be here to share my thoughts and experiences in higher ed with everyone. My story is similar to Robyn's. It really speaks to learning about intentionality and learning about growing together. I was thinking about my Leadership Fellows cohort, my first year, and how critical and really transformative those bonds have been, particularly about 3 of my close friends who I found in that cohort. And we're all from different majors. We're going into different career paths as we're heading towards graduation about 2 weeks. But honing in on that first year, the main story I had was about our summer retreat in the start of the fall semester, I should say, and having these different students and these just different perspectives coming together and understanding what it means to appreciate those different backgrounds, while also honing in on the commonalities that we were all having, being nervous about starting our first year of college, getting adjusted to campus. A lot of us are from out of state, in places different from North Carolina, first gen, people from different regions in the United States. And so understanding that I can build relationships in a very intentional and encouraging way. When I think about the rest of the 3 years I had at Elon, those are the friends that I would go to when I did poorly on an exam, or I was struggling during COVID to keep up with my virtual classes. And that story about the retreat and being in a non-academic context and being able to build those relationships and see some of those same people in class and be classmates that really contributed to, I would say, more holistic friendships and relationships. And those have been some of the most valuable relationships and dearest friends that I've made. And those have really carried me the rest of the 4 years. And so I'm really thankful to have had that experience that stemmed from a cohort, but have certainly grown me as like an individual as well.
Thank you, Amaya. Cohorts are powerful, aren't they?
Absolutely.
I want to ask you both now about the role of faculty and staff in helping students feel a connection, a sense of belonging. What are your thoughts about some of the most important things faculty and staff can do to seed meaningful relationships? Robyn, do you want to go first?
Sure. So at Abertay, I'm lucky that it's quite a small university, so you get to know your lecturers and you get to know people in your class. So it's got a really nice community feel. So some of the things at Abertay that they do to support students, one of the things is they've got something called peer mentoring, and what that is, they'll get students who are in the latter years of their course, and they'll then meet with some of the newer students. So the first years, people just starting university, and it's quite an informal relationship. You can meet up for coffee, things like that. So when I was in my first year, I signed up to this, and I was assigned a mentor who was a few years above me, studying the same course. And that was really nice, because at first it did start, I didn't see it as a mentorship. I saw it more as a friendship. It was nice having someone similar age to me, speak to me about different opportunities in the university and things like that. And yeah, a friendship did form out of it. And, we still keep in touch every so often today. So that's a good thing. I suppose it's a combination of what students and faculty can do. I think as well, just making students feel welcome every day when they come into university. We've got a lovely receptionist at our university. So when I come in each morning, I maybe smile to her or say hello, and we have a quick chat. Oh, what did you get up to the weekend? And that's really lovely, because it means each day when I come in, I've got this nice wee conversation, or even just a smile, a wee wave. It really sets you on the right path for the day. And I'm lucky that everyone I've encountered at Abertay has been, really warm, welcome and supportive. And I'm not just saying that, that's genuinely how I feel. It is a lovely community feel university. So I suppose if bigger institutions could try and adopt, these different wee things to encourage students to feel part of a community, that would be great.
That's a wonderful story. We have 450 teaching faculty at Elon University, but 1,500 employees total. And I think we try to emphasize a campus culture where every one of those 1,500 people thinks of themselves as a supporter of students, and somebody that can really make a difference in a student's day and a student's life by the simple daily acts of conversation and kindness. Amaya, can we hear from you now?
Sure. A couple of things that stood out to me when Robyn was speaking about what faculty and students did to sort of have this reciprocal mentorship model, I would say, is sort of these like almost tap on the shoulder moments that Dr. Lambert and I have talked about. Sometimes it's just saying, hello, how are you? And for me, it's been faculty and staff connecting me with other students who we share similar interests or similar career goals. And it's really, I think about in my experience at Elon, it's really about having those people in your life who sometimes believe in you and see things in you that you don't see in yourself, and really viewing themselves as, I would say, facilitators of student success, both in an academic and non-academic context. A person who really stands out to me in that mind frame is my research mentor, my undergraduate research mentor, and academic advisor, Dr. Dylan Bono-Lunn. And one of the conversations we often have is she doesn't view herself strictly as a teaching faculty member, but rather I feel it is her personal. She feels it it gives the impression that she views it as her personal obligation to drive student success and sort of co-pilot this plane that I have for my personal, my professional, my academic goals. And that's something that's driven me to sort of pay that forward as I go into graduate school, and also being a peer mentor as well, and being able to provide a smoother pathway and a more informed, wise pathway for students that have come into university after me. So I think working together between students and faculty, that's really what enriches that culture, that encourages that relational approach where that relentless welcome can happen in the most organic, authentic way possible.
So, Leo, I want to jump in on Amaya's comment quickly and ask both Amaya and Robyn to maybe do two things briefly to extend on something that both of you talked about. And Amaya used the phrase paying it forward. And Robyn, you talked about how that friendship, mentorship, and how you started benefiting from it and then you contributed to it. So I'd be really curious about two things. One is if you could comment really briefly on what enabled you to make that transition from the one who was sort of receiving help from peers to the seeing yourself as someone who's offering that support and help. And then secondly, you're both so modest. Could you tell us a tiny bit about what you're doing right now or in the near future, just so people get a clearer sense of who you are and what your connection is to the university you're at? And since we've been having Robyn go first, Amaya, why don't you go first?
All right, thank you. To start off with what I'm doing now, I'm in my last 2 weeks of my undergraduate education. I study political science and public policy, and I'm excited to share that in the next couple of months, or starting in fall 2023, I will be a doctoral student at Cornell University, studying to get my PhD in public policy on the political science track. And one of the things that's led me to sort of take that path has been a lot of my experiential education opportunities at Elon to do undergraduate research. I won the largest grant offered to undergraduate students at Elon that provides $20,000 to fund my research. Right now, I'm studying anti-poverty policies across 6 different states in the US to advocate for a more inclusive, diverse policymaking process and analysis model. Dr. Felten, if you could repeat the second part of the question, I'm sorry.
What enabled you to make the transition from receiving support from peers to offering support, seeing yourself as maybe a peer mentor?
Absolutely. I think back on my peers who were maybe juniors and seniors and just upperclassmen getting ready to take a step into their next chapter after graduating Elon, and just really seeing how committed they were to pouring that wisdom and that investment into me, and just understanding that it's not in a transactional way, as we talked about earlier. It's really just the power of sharing these experiences, sharing advice in a way that can help grow someone else and allow them to create their own unique pathway to their goals. And I think something that I often, like a recurring thought that I had when I was younger in university was, this person doesn't have like a tangible stake in my student success. Of course, we want peers and our friends to do well in school. We want friends to be great to be around and share similar values and things like that. And when I think about peer mentorship and the greatest peer mentors in my life, those are the people that were going to be happy whether I was going to graduate school, getting a job, going on a Fulbright. But it really centered about the core of what makes me happy and what was going to make me successful in my endeavors. And so having that commitment that's really driven by a passion for creating relationships and seeing other people succeed, that really resonated with me. And every semester I've tried to reach out to people in my department and the different cohorts that I'm in to be able to provide that same experience, because I know how critical and transformative that was for me.
Well, let's ask one more question.
Wait. Robyn's got to jump in, Leo.
Oh, I'm sorry.
Yeah.
That's
Did you
okay.
have things to? We've got to tell us who you are at least.
So what I'm doing currently, I'm a third year student at Abertay studying criminology, but last year I was the president of the Abertay Students Association. So to answer Peter's question about what sort of gave me the change from going from someone who was receiving help to then being able to give out help as president, I think seeing, you know, my peer mentor and things, and I saw, well, she's a student like me and she's able to help me, and people see this label, oh, president, and they think, you know, they put it on a pedestal, you know, it's this great person, but no, it's not. It's just, you know, a student like anyone else. So I sort of approached it like that. I thought, well, you know, I'll put myself forward for it. I might get it. That would be wonderful if I did, but if I don't, it will have been a great experience running. So I put myself forward, and I think a lot of my friends and family were surprised. They didn't expect it was something that I do, but I did, and then was elected by the students and was able to provide support. I started a campaign called, or restarted a campaign called Abertasty, where we'd give out food to students once a week, and just seeing, you know, the light on their faces when they came and they were able to get food. And there were some sad stories, but it had a nice ending. You know, students would come in and they'd say, wow, I didn't have any food in the cupboard, or I couldn't have breakfast this morning. And then being able to say, well, help yourself. And they'd say, can I take more? And yes, of course, take as much as you want, it's for you. And I think learning, you know, that I really enjoy helping people, and that's kind of what made me think, well, I suppose it's something that I enjoy doing, and I want to keep doing that throughout my life. And once I finish my degree, I'd love to have a job where I'm able to help people. So I might have gone in a slight tangent there, but I hope that answers your question, Peter.
Well, we'll finish up our conversation among the four of us here with one more question. And I wanted to ask both of you, Robyn and Amaya, about your advice to institutions. If from a student perspective, what are the most important things for institutions to focus on in creating relationship-rich environments for their students? Either one of you can go when you're ready.
If it's okay, I'll go first. Mainly because of what Robyn said in the previous answer about sometimes universities and higher education, there's a tendency to put the model students on a pedestal. And I was also looking through the chat about a critique of campus culture that is sometimes, and I wouldn't even say sometimes, really oftentimes very exclusionary of the non-standard student, whether that be in terms of identity, background, socioeconomic status, and other different parts of one's identity. And it's a point of reflection that I've had about how I've been able to navigate the adjustment to Elon and be successful in an academic and non-academic context. And I've often asked myself, if I didn't have that agency and if I didn't have those resources, would I have been successful? And while I think it's great that students like Robyn and myself are often highlighted and given opportunities to do things like this, I think higher education institutions could do a much better job of diversifying the students that are sort of marketable to the university and highlighted in ways that are more holistic than GPA and these really almost tangible academic successes, because that's not everyone's sole motivator to be the 4.0 student. And of course, academic success is at the forefront of higher education. But I think what transcends that is a student finding their passion, finding a constellation of mentors to drive that passion and develop tangible steps that they can take long after university. And I think that really speaks to a lot of the challenges that institutions, I would even say globally, are facing of this sort of enrollment crisis where students are graduating and sort of hit this plateau and have to question sort of the value of that education. And so my advice, I think, to institutions is to highlight students in a way that gets at the difference between relational and transactional approaches to higher education. The students that stood out to me the most when I first arrived on campus were not the students who were the most well-connected in the tangible ways of knowing all the most important people at the university, but knowing the people who they could call upon in different parts of their life to advise them on academic matters, professional matters, and personal matters, and not in a way that's solely tied to a position. And so I think once institutions do that, students will feel more agency to sort of seek that experience out rather than having to feel like they need to be competitive in order to be an excellent student and build a network rather than building a constellation.
Beautifully said, Amaya. Thank you. Robyn?
I think my advice would be just about being able to connect to students on a personal level if they're able to do that. I suppose I'm lucky, again, because Abertay is quite a small university, but you know, even if we have had a really large class, you know, with 200 students, the lecturers would, you know, they'd stay behind and say, you know, if you've got any questions, just come forward and ask. So if I wasn't sure about something, I could go and speak to them then and there. And, you know, that was wonderful, because you then didn't have to go home and think, oh, well, I didn't understand that. I wasn't sure about that. So I think that's a wonderful thing that academic staff can do if they have the time. But I think that extends to all staff in general. Again, I'm lucky at Abertay. You know, everyone's always made me feel welcome, you know, whoever that is, and helped me along my path. So yeah, I suppose just reaching out to students on a personal level and making them feel welcome. We've sort of mentioned the word the relentless welcome a few times, but absolutely relate to that. There can be this focus on Freshers Week, you know, when students first join, you know, make the students feel welcome, do all these fun events, you know, have music, food, all kind of things, and that's great. But then after that, you need something to carry on, because after the first week and students settle down a bit, if they've not made those connections that we're talking about, they can then maybe question themselves a bit and go, oh, I'm not quite settling in, as university for me. And if that welcome isn't extended throughout the year, they might end up leaving university. So yeah, continuing, you know, to make students feel welcome throughout their entire course at university, not just the first week, the first year. You know, every single day is really important.
Thank you, Robyn. I heard a faculty member at Muhlenberg College last Friday afternoon comment on our book, and she said, I was just struck with how many stories of simple human kindness there were in this book. Kindness goes a long way. Kindness and welcome go a very long way in this arena, don't they? Well, Claire, I know you have been monitoring the chat, and perhaps there are questions that one or more of us can address, or comments that people would like to offer from our wonderful audience.
Absolutely. There's a fascinating debate going on in the chat about campus culture and things, but I'm going to turn first of all to Ashleigh Blackwood, who has a question for both Peter and Amaya. So Ashleigh, are you able to unmute and join us?
Thank you very much, Claire, for picking up on that. And thank you to all four speakers. You've got my imagination completely captured. I had couched these questions for Peter and Amaya, but the four of you might have something to say on them. Turning first to Peter's talk, your scholarship on student engagement since about 2014 has influenced so much of what I've done across UKHE. I guess I've been an institutional actor in a lot of places, students' unions, as a faculty member, I'm now in learning development. And in all of these roles, I'm kind of struck by how much I've centered my own practice on the idea of partnership with students. But in terms of framing that relationship, you've talked about relentless welcome, and both Robyn and Amaya have pointed out how important is that. Do you think, any of the four of you, in terms of framing that relationship, do we need to be using the language of partnership from the start, or do we need that welcome to be simple kindness before students can encounter those concepts that we spent years building, but they haven't necessarily, and tackling what that means. It's a bit chicken and egg. I don't know whether to welcome students with partnership or to welcome them and then build that. And I just wondered if you could say anything on that.
Robyn, Amaya, do you have thoughts right out of the gate, or would you rather I start?
I had a thought right out of the gate. I think that was perfectly said at the end of not knowing whether to welcome students with partnership or it's sort of like the chicken and the egg thing like Ashleigh was mentioning. But I think it's perfectly said of just welcoming students with partnership. When I think back to some of the first coffee chats I had with my dearest friends and mentors, that conversation has almost always ended with a sentence that says, I'm here, consider me as a resource and a partner in your success. And I think the kindness is sort of embedded in extending that welcome. And that welcomeness occurs every single time. I've talked to some of these mentors of saying, you know, I appreciate this update. I appreciate hearing about what you're doing. And as always, if you need anything, don't hesitate to reach out. And so I truly feel like those mentors are partners in my success, rather than these sort of like isolated relationships where we only speak only like strictly about academic things, but even personal updates as well. And so I think having those mesh really well together is probably like the best approach.
Robyn, do you want to say anything first, or?
Sure. Yeah, I think you can do a bit of both. So welcome students before they come and while they are arriving. So even things like just sending an email out to students who are going to be coming into the university and saying, you know, welcome to, you know, this university, this, you know, these are our first facilities, these are the different things that we do. So before they've even stepped foot on the campus, potentially they're getting a sense of what it's like, and that could probably ease a lot of the anxiety. You know, it is quite daunting, especially for students who are moving perhaps from far away, different countries, even across the world. Being able to see a bit of the university, it could be, you know, doing online sessions such as this, being able to speak to students online, or, you know, doing a session on campus, come in and have some coffee and a piece of cake and chat to some students, chat to some staff members, and let the students, you know, maybe start to build those connections initially before they've even joined the university. But then, of course, once they have joined and they are starting to join, absolutely build those partnerships, build those relationships, and continue those on throughout the year.
Well, you can see why we wanted Robyn and Amaya to be featured in this session, because they're brilliant. And I just want to underline a couple things they said, starting with Robyn's point. You didn't say it quite this way, but very clearly you're saying sort of lead with empathy, recognize how overwhelming the start of the university can feel to many students, or if you're transferring in as not a first year student. Even that, everything is new. And I think sometimes we who are staff, we get comfortable with our language, we get comfortable with the structures of the university, we say, now we're partners, right? And the students are like, I don't even know who you are, and you're telling me I'm a partner, right? But there's a book that really influenced my thinking quite a lot, by a scholar named Roberta Espinosa. It's called Pivotal Moments, and it's about young Latinx high school and college students in Los Angeles. And one of the things Espinosa says that I think is really helpful is, she said, too often what institutions and what people who are aspiring mentors do is simply encourage and support. And Espinosa says that's really important, but these students need information also. So to Amaya's point, and Amaya, the way you described this, I thought was just lovely. You know, start by making a human connection and then say, this is my role here. I'm your partner in this work, right? So don't leave that unspoken as if students understand. They don't necessarily, but probably you don't introduce yourself. I wouldn't introduce, hi, I'm Peter, I'm your partner. Don't do that. First get to know, and then follow, helping sort of demystify the structures and the roles and the possibilities.
Peter, if I
Thank
could
you.
add on, Ashleigh, Amaya and I had the pleasure of working with Amaya for 2 years teaching a first-year seminar. And one of the things we do very early in the semester is bring in a student faculty partner pair to talk about their relationship. How did they meet? What kind of work are you doing together? I think this notion of partnership is important, but I think to very new students, it can also be vague. And it was fascinating to see students, absolutely on the edge of their seats thinking, this is wonderful. And our goal was to say, this is what it's all about. This is what university is. This is what we want for all of you. And we had to walk them back a little bit at the end of class and make clear that this might not happen for you in the first week or even the first month of college. This takes effort, but they again see the simple steps that can lead to the seeding of these partnerships. Sending an email to a professor or stopping by office hours and saying, I was really fascinated by something that happened in class today, and build from there. So practical strategies like that, I think, can make this notion of partnership seem much more real to students.
Thank you all so much.
Thank you, Ashleigh, for such a fascinating question. So I'm just going to turn now to Patricia Matruta. I mean, there's been a lot of discussion in the chat about this question, but I think it would be really nice to hear from our speakers on this question. So, Patricia.
Yes, thank you. It actually came as a reflection, so I apologize. I'm one of those people who, instead of asking a question, just went on a rant. So I work at the Edinburgh Futures Institute at the University of Edinburgh, and the idea of conceptualizing student community as a kind of non-monolithic, diverse entity is something very close to my heart. At EFI, the pedagogical model that we are currently introducing is just a bit crazy, in a sense that it kind of muddles together the hybrid, the online, and the on campus. And it was quite interesting because what we found at the beginning of the first semester last year was that the academic would be on campus and providing, during the 2-day intensive kind of workshop based teaching, they would kind of do the lecture and do the work group on campus. However, quite a lot of the online students would join in at the same time, so it was a synchronous exercise. And what we found is that sometimes those who were teaching wouldn't acknowledge the online students at all, to a point where we would then have to encourage them to even just say hello to them, not to mention kind of implement and embed the online student or the hybrid student into the teaching. And my comment was on how we conceptualize campus, and that quite often we think of campus as something quite physical, and I find it quite a potentially exclusionary kind of definition, because then what do we do with those that don't fit into the standard, as was discussed, the standard definition, the age, the identities, the working people, and all of those people. And so yeah, it's a very difficult kind of relationship to negotiate, I think, with those who are not standard, and in particular those who are online, on digital in some ways. So if you have any reflections on this, or how you deal with it yourself in your practice or at your institutions, I would be very happy to hear.
I'll start this one because we keep throwing Amaya and Robyn onto the bus first, but I hope Robyn, Amaya, and Leo will chime in. First, the work you all are doing at Edinburgh Futures work is it's world leading. So thank you for that. It's really quite exciting. Two two broad thoughts from me besides echoing your rant, which I think is exactly right. One is, in the US at least, we were talking before about carts and chickens and eggs. I'll bring in the cart and horse thing. We spend way too much time thinking about either technology or location or what the professors do. And what we really need to be thinking about is students and learning and relationships, right? Because as we have a tiny example in relationship-rich education from a faculty member at the University of Nebraska before COVID, who taught a 700-student fully asynchronous online introduction course. And the students had such a high sense of belonging in this course, partly because of the way she taught the course, but there also was a space in the course that was called the Student Study Lounge. And the purpose of that space was for students to help each other succeed in the course. And the professor did a number of things to encourage students to use the study lounge, but students got no credit for it. So it wasn't you're getting extra credit, but the students would set a goal as a class of what they wanted the class average to be on each exam. And then the professor would encourage them to use the study lounge. And by the end of the term, almost all students were in the study lounge every week, completely voluntary. And the professor there, Amanda Williamson, said, part of this was possible because of the scale. In the first couple of weeks of the semester, if only 5% of students were participating, that was still 35. It felt like a lot, so it felt like there was energy. And then students could find connections. One of the things so often in the US we think about is small classes are good and in-person classes are good. And they can be, but they also really limit who you could possibly connect with. And if you're in a much bigger class, if it's coordinated well, designed well, students can connect with people who have similar identities or different identities in ways that aren't always possible in a class sitting around a table of 10 people. So I think we shouldn't just assume online or non-traditional is bad. We should assume or think about what's afforded, what's possible with relationships. Leo, Amaya, Robyn, anything you want to add?
When we were writing relationship-rich education, I had the privilege of visiting Southern New Hampshire University, which is a 180,000 student online institution here in the United States. Many of their students are at their third or fourth or fifth or sixth or seventh try at college. Their model, I think, is very interesting in that it brings intentionally in this face-to-face, human-to-human element in terms of writing coaching that augments instruction, and in terms of weekly academic advising and check-in. So it's, again, not an either-or model. Their president, Paul LeBlanc, describes these human connections as the secret sauce that makes that online experience work. Oftentimes, these writing coaches will work with a particular student over multiple semesters and multiple courses and get to know them, get to know their families, that student's life experience, and is there to hug them when they come to campus maybe one time for a commencement ceremony. And so I admire models like that are online models that are trying to think about ways to embed relationship-rich experiences within them. And Southern New Hampshire is one to take a look at.
Thank you very much for that question. I think we just have time up for just one more question, but we probably need to answer it quite quickly. But I'm going to turn to Rachel Forsyth just to ask her question quite quickly, and then perhaps turn to Leah, Peter, Robyn, and Amaya for a quick response. So, Rachel.
It was a rhetorical question, really, but I think I'm really struck, particularly, thank you, Robyn and Amaya, for what you've said. I was really struck by Robyn talking about the receptionist always being cheerful. It's kind of luck. Maybe it was luck, or maybe she was really well trained. particularly in UK universities. I think people forget sometimes why they're there. They get stuck in their own little part of the university and don't always think about students. So how can we, I was going to ask Peter and Leo, how can you get that culture where everybody feels they're contributing to every individual student's success just by being there? That's why we're there. Sorry, that's really hard.
For me, it comes down to this idea, this work being central to your mission and to your hiring processes. I think people are attracted to work at different institutions for different reasons. If you come to our institution, I think we tend to attract a faculty and staff colleagues who are dedicated to creating an environment where excellent teaching is prized, where the classroom is centered, and where human relationships are deeply valued. That is not the kind of academic environment that everyone chooses to work in. But I think that culture is largely shaped by the people who are attracted to come here, and the ways that they are socialized to succeed in this environment as new employees in particular. Peter?
So Leo, I really appreciate your answer and this sort of structural nature of it and thinking about the structures. I want to respond with a slightly different approach, which is a technique that I have learned from colleagues and now use with colleagues. We're asking staff, you can do this with students too, but asking staff to identify someone at the institution who they think is really remarkable with students. And everybody can do this. And then ask them to say, what do they do with students? And what happens, first of all, is people tell these stories that they want to tell about their colleagues who they really think highly of. But the stories they tell aren't really ever about personality or about role. They're about, to use a phrase Leo brought in, simple human kindness. They're about relentless welcome. They're about smiling and calling people by names and things like this. And pretty soon in these conversations, it's easy as a facilitator to say, okay, so, these amazing colleagues you have, they're not doing things that take huge expertise or skill. They're doing things that are just simple human connections. And that can create it can lay the foundation for the kind of culture that then makes it easier for students to reach out for help, easier for students to see faculty and staff as allies in their work and things like this. So someone in the chat used a wonderful phrase about a virtuous cycle. You can set that up. So.
Oh, Peter, what a fascinating insight to finish this presentation with. I think those words will come with me forever. Relentless welcome is certainly something that I will be part of my mantra going forward. So Peter, Leo, Robyn and Amaya, thank you so much for your insights today. It's been absolutely fascinating to hear you talk, especially you as students who've been able to give us your lived experience and to hear from you. And thank you so much for the honesty with which you've expressed your thoughts. So I really, really appreciate it. Just to remind colleagues again, the 20 Years of Enhancement campaign program is available. Please go along and listen to the other fascinating talks that we've had as part of this campaign. And thank you so much for your lunchtime today. We've really enjoyed the conversation in the chat. There's been a wealth of information happening in the chat, and I'm sure Peter and Leo are going to love reading what you've all been saying after this presentation. So thank you very much indeed. We really look forward to seeing you at some point soon, possibly at the conference in the summer. Thank you.